It is, of course, with the greatest of pleasures and honours that I, your dear archivist, am now able to finally discuss my home. The grand theocracy of Neo Eden. I have to be honest, there's so much I could say. There really is. And so much I even don't know. But, simply put, I will do my best to give you an overview of Neo Eden, of the forces, the people, and society. Bit of history, bit of culture. But there is much to discuss, and we will be here for quite some time. But I will try my best to keep this at a respectable length for consumption's sake. With that being said, what is Neo Eden? Neo Eden is a colossal city-state. It is a techno-theocracy, is the best way to describe it. A society built on extremely, and I mean this wholeheartedly, and honestly with no bias here, extremely advanced technology. Many of these technologies I simply can't comprehend. Nor am I expected to, thankfully. But on top of the extreme technological usage of Neo Eden is also a strong faith in the Maker. This is perhaps the city of the Maker. For all intents and purposes, this is his holy city, his body, his work. This is the land that he poured his entire being into, and was the last great project before he left. It is our belief that he left as part of a grander project, up into the stars, though some say he simply vanished. It is unknown, and we won't get into too much of that, but I have to explain this a little, as you need to understand, this city is where the faith was born. Neo Eden is far ahead technologically than any other nation. We have infinite power sources that can power anything from entire blocks of the city to entire autonomous war machines that are fully sapient and able to react as needed for a combat situation, to even our angels, what makes the city so famous. These beyond human celestial beings are staggeringly powerful, faster than you could believe, and truly immortal. Many of them nearing 100 years old now. Some less, but they don't age a day. But let me pull it back a little bit. How did we get here? There is much I even don't know, so some of the early history of Neo Eden is shrouded, but what is important to understand is the main culturally understood founding was after the cleansing. A great battle took place. The last of the celestial entities that came down to purge all of us were felled. The weapons which would eventually adorn the walls of the city were used to decimate the last remaining of these celestials. At this victory site, the Maker decreed that this land was sacred, and so a great city was founded. It took nearly a century, if not more, to get to anywhere near where we are now. But what remains to be seen is where we could go from here. In but perhaps a century, we have gone from being a small settlement, creating the first great bastion walls, to now having multiple layers of walls, various sectors of the city, of which there are currently, to my understanding, 9 or so sectors at this point. Though there are some debates on this. Some will say there's only 8 and so on. We won't go too nitty-gritty, but the city is vast now. A home to millions upon millions of souls. Each wall built out as a defiant step into the deserts around us. You might ask, where are we in the world? We are very near the coast of South America, in the Atlantic wastes. Hence why we can maintain a good watch over the Amazon rainforests and ensure they are surviving despite all odds. It's a miracle in of itself, honestly. We do have our outposts, mind. We have one in New York, one in Britain, and there are some attempts to make one in Africa. Early days on that one. As for the city itself, it stretches for, well, If you're stood near the center, it goes on to the horizon. Vast, towering skyscrapers, highways that must stretch over buildings, and even in the skies themselves are filled with various vehicles. Because yes, much like was believed to be possible long ago, we have finally achieved the idea of the flying car. Gravitational technology is simply ubiquitous here, whereas other nations make use of leg, track, wheel. We still do sometimes, but we long managed to master gravitational technologies. Anti-grav is simply the norm now. As such, any military, high-end vehicles are all anti-grav, and some even full-on fly. A lot of the more standard cars do use wheels, because you don't need to reinvent them, they work, but the materials are far superior. Though, of course, to make good use of them, one must ensure they make good payments on their license fees. As something you should know about Neo Eden, it is also a very corporate place. Mega corporations hold immense power, and some of the highest and most prestigious have their CEOs invited into the clergy. Or sometimes clergy make a company. These companies could be anything from civilian products to military enterprises to resource extraction, construction, and in the extreme cases, there are those companies who are given the prestigious honor to build and maintain our angels. We'll get to those a bit later, but those companies are quite renowned and do more than just that, typically. But their primary assets are the angels, and they are given quite the budget. To get into more of the founding of Neo Eden, it's very tied to the Maker. We'll do an entire log on the Maker. Praise be upon him. The Maker came with his cohorts, his disciples. This land was deemed holy, and so constructed upon. Vast workers were brought in, and even city construction units were brought in as well. You may remember from our log on Dravania, a machine like that was utilised, though the Maker brought free. They were used until they burned out. Then they were deconstructed, and their very parts were built into the bones of the city. Their power cores extracted for early use. Though later we would go on to more esoteric means of power supply, as we don't use nuclear or coal, solar. We make use of, from what I understand, the Grace, a limitless, vapor-like power source that is able to wirelessly transfer throughout the entire city. The only downside is the range. It can be boosted, but these boosters are very fragile and not suitable for the wastes. Not like the laser-borne power supplies the Republic have experimented with, something we have looked at ourselves. But the Grace is wireless. As such, any kind of technology that can receive electrical input can be powered. From a simple child's toy to a car. Now, of course, to receive this Grace, you must, of course, pay your tithe. Very important. The other big thing as well, we actually have artificial weather cycles here. This was deemed important for public morale, and it's something we're just able to do. We have various drones, typically cherubim, though some lesser drones as well are brought in, to anoint the ground with rain. What are the cherubim, you may be asking? We'll get to those later. As the city grew, the Maker began employing a few more of his works, because very early on, he started what would later be known as the Ancients Project. To my understanding, some Celestials didn't wish to destroy humanity, and so bowed to the Maker, rightfully so. He transformed them into what we now know as the Ancients, the very first cyber angels, and Neo Eden's very own super heavy assets. These beings are immensely powerful, and maintained by the Prophet's own people. We'll get to the Prophet and the clergy soon, don't worry. They came a bit later. So, these Ancients were the early defense system. These vast, biblical beings, great wings of eyes upon them, or rings, again, bearing eyes, or even weapons of immense firepower. These beings were few in number, and are irreplaceable, but they were truly awe-inspiring, so I'm told. Very rarely they're deployed nowadays, but when they are, the world knows. The world feels it. As time went on, Neo Eden began to militarize to a point, seeing the world changing, and nations like the Empire, who we believe founded by a disciple of the Maker, We know this disciple left the Maker's side early on. We believe also St. Genesis also disappeared as well, though it remains to be seen, as many of her technologies and works still exist here. Cures to various diseases, birth defects and the like, cancers. Genetic modification is still prevalent, and as the city began to flourish, people began embracing cybernetic enhancement and genetic augmentation. The city had to begin inputting laws to prevent any overt deviation, though there are some who've deviated quite far from the human form, as the Humanist law came into effect, a law that dictated that you must not deviate too far from humanity. Your silhouette should be recognizably human. There are some in more seedier districts who have replaced more of themselves than was legally allowed. And even to this day, there are those who have a more serpentine body or equine. Though the equine is, many believe, how should we say this? An attempt to mirror a dragoon. It's not demonized as much, that one, but it's seen as odd. Though there are the more arachnid-like as well. As I say, not legal, but in certain more less wholesome districts, shall we say, some people seek exotic things, and, well, those people become exotic, shall we say. Is what it is, I suppose. Though genetically as well, some will modify themselves. There are some who are interested in gaining more animalistic properties, shall we say. A tail, ears, the like. It's a very niche subculture, but I have to mention it because it's a thing that happens. It's how ubiquitous this technology truly is. Such technologies were actually utilized later into an agency who would both entertain and go to battle. A topic for another time, but I have to stress that groups like the Apex Idols came from Neo Eden originally. Again, the technology, which they do use a lot of, even the gravitational. These great advances pushed us to a very high level of industry, high level of learning, and also at points a high level of degeneracy, which then had to be cracked down upon by the faithful. It's an ongoing problem, but what can we do? We can't be everywhere at once, eh? However, in this time was also when the Paladins initiative was started. Neo Eden already had various troops at their deployment, but we needed something more, and the Maker was still working upon his final gift to us. So, as the wall guns were mounted, and the still augmented, but rather standard troops with their smart weapons were deployed, the Paladins were being assembled as well. To mention our troops a little bit, blessed they are given standardized augmentations to assist with breathing, water consumption, stamina, and also their helmets are fitted with various augmented reality units to assist in dulling the senses to the horrors of war. Should their friend die in battle, they won't see the body, and they will instead be pumped with adrenaline and other substances to assist in their concentration on the fight at hand. Their augmented reality units also link to smart weaponry, as, well, of course they're trusted to aim and fire their weapons, but what if the weapon could also assist in hitting the target? It would mean that the bar for a soldier would be much lower. However, those who prove themselves may be initiated into the Paladin program, which was initially started off in the Britain outpost. When that was set up, various very early invasions of the demonic nature had arrived, and as such, the standard troops were not enough. So the Paladins were initiated, utilizing power armor to integrate into the human being, but also extreme cybernetic augmentation to push someone beyond standard human limitations. The two together meant that their bulky, power-armoured frames were more than enough to withstand demonic assault, and they would be the shield of which our enemies would crash against. Gifted with high-frequency blades, and a weapon that was meant to be a prototype. However, it ended up becoming quite the favourite among them. The Railcam, a 50 caliber machine gun that utilised a railgun for secondary acceleration. This would essentially push an anti-material round far faster than any right to go. Again, we do have rail and coil weaponry, and the paladins do make use of them, as well as lasers, of course. And not as many as the Empire, but the odd particle weapon too, though mostly vehicle-mounted. They quite liked the railchem, and they were very easy to supply. So, due to their preference, the fact that the ammunition was, again, simple, and honestly, where we deploy paladins, it just made sense. And the rail element was useful in punching through the heavy mechanical and thick hides of demons and the like. They would also be fitted, as I say, high-frequency blades and various other weaponry, should they desire it. The best in breast transportation, the works. During this time as well, various corporations, either from the old world or newly founded, began to go out into the world, utilizing various vehicles such as the Lowrider, which was previously shown and sharing on the archives itself. The Lowrider saw good success, though was later augmented with a high-powered laser weapon to assist. These corporate teams would later become more formalized and accepted as simply part of New Eden. They can, of course, offer their services elsewhere, as long as they don't threaten New Eden, of course. And certain things they find are to be immediately reported. This privatization of military wouldn't stop here, though, as, well, they go a step further. When the Maker did leave, he left after deploying the very first Cyber Angels. A few high order, and a few low order, as well as the already quite common-sighted Cherubim, of which the designs he gave out. Corporations snatched them up quite quickly once he'd left, and it was at this time that the Prophet were founded. The Prophet, which this is the fourth one now we've had, he and his chosen clergy became the ruling council. All laws, all everything was decided through them. Church and state were finally one, as was believed was right and proper. Corporations then pined for whatever they could get. You might say, well, how do they keep them under control? And well, that's because the wealthy of Neo Eden don't have currency. They have a digitized currency. Cryptography, it's the wrong word, no. A cryptocurrency of sort. In essence, it's a way of the state controlling the very wealthy. By gifting them a near infinite resource to buy whatever they wish, it is with the understanding that that currency can be cut off at any time, and fully tracked. This then meant that the various CEOs and the like could be corralled and kept in check. The Ministry of the Veil was also founded to facilitate this and later act as more of a secret police, or what's really proper to call them, the Inquisition. It was through the Inquisition as well that another project was established, as they wanted their own angels, but they also wanted something in between, something a bit more commonplace. As such, the Nephilim program was established. I realize I'm mentioning many programs here, but you have to understand, everything's very bureaucratic, corporatized. It is the way things are here. Everything has to be an initiative, a program, so on and so forth. The Nephilim were wounded paladins who could still had the will to fight, but their bodies could not. So they were given a choice, and once they accepted, either by verbally accepting or via cranial plug to contact their consciousness as yes, again, this is something we have access to, they were then granted augmentations that would put them not on par with the angels, but it was a similar quality, and would allow them to wield far more devastating weaponry. Typically, this is the form of various particle cannons and extremely powerful concussion hammers and maces. You may remember from the Raiders, as I understand, they utilize a similar weaponry of sorts. These, however, are far more refined variants of the technology. It was inspired by them, as it worked. However, we found a more efficient way to generate a force field of sorts that could then crash against something. Rather than exploding, they would utilize the field to put resistance, if that makes sense. Again, won't go too far into it. With these Nephilim, though, the Ministry of the Veil had their very efficient and lethal super soldiers that they would use over paladins. Of course, they would still make use of standard troops, though augmented a little further into fanatics who were willing to give their lives to the cause, shall we say. You may realise I haven't started about the angels yet, and, well, that's going to change, as our beloved angels are the pride and joy of Neo Eden. They are warrior, holy worker, and in many ways celebrity. We'll start with what the angels are. They are martyrs and blessed people, men and women who are given the opportunity to serve the Maker and Neo Eden eternally as vigilant, beautiful cyborg warriors, gifted with flight via their beautiful energy wings, and, to my understanding, a ludicrously powerful power source to push them far beyond human limitations. They are given the finest cyberware, the finest augmentations, and the greatest weapons we can give them. They are our ace. They are very much how we win many conflicts, and have very much been a paradigm shift in the world. To start with the low orders, then. The low orders are made up of 3 different groups. These groups are the powers, the domains. These low orders are made up of various different groups. They are the powers, the virtues, and the domains. These individuals are people who are taken, either because they are injured and broken, or volunteer, and are approved. As again, there's a lot of approval going into this, because it's not just a small thing to become an angel. They're taken, radically augmented, depending on which order they're a part of. But each are given, to my understanding, a capacitor of sorts. This infinite battery, which is then suffused with, to my understanding, grace. Once they're suffused fully, which they are constantly exposed to it as part of their augmentation process, they are then given a limitless power supply, allowing them to fly, use various inbuilt weaponry, or whatever weapon they wish. The mere grace produced from them able to power the weapons themselves, such as lasers and the like. The 3 orders work very differently. We'll start with the powers. They are close quarters powerhouses. They typically have one arm further augmented with an extra power supply to empower a extremely powerful high-frequency blade, which almost bursts into flame. They also come with various close-quarters weapons, shotguns, and the like, though far better quality than what you or I will get and be able to handle, frankly. The caliber of these weapons would rip your arm off. Even augmented, it'd be a struggle sometimes. Now, they are, as I say, are close-quarters brawlers. You have the virtues, who act as angelic support. They utilise, essentially, their grace to heal. As yes, it can be in concentrated amounts used to heal others, typically other angels, though sometimes people as well. But they also have a strong technophurgy unit built into them. This is their primary purpose, to be essentially combat hackers and support. Though they of course come with very smart weaponry, and typically stay the mid-ground around the soldiery, or other angels. As I say, they're support, but they can still fight, and still come with high-frequency blades, and the like. They're angels still, after all. The last one, the domains. Heaviest augmented of the 3. They are both heavy assault units and air support. Heavy support in the fact that if they land, they have various built-in force fields that project from one of their arms, or bodies in general, and typically have very heavy weaponry. Devastating particle weapons, or just full-on Gatling cannons with smart weapons built into them, essentially. Imagine a Gatling gun that sprays bullets that will find you. It's exactly what you think. Or, of course, laser weaponry. The works. Alternatively, they can forgo these to have more inbuilt rocket launchers and high-frequency lancers to essentially act as air support. Some will have the Gatling cannons too, it depends a little bit. You may remember from the log on Dravania, these were used in quite heavy amounts. And, to be honest, with the assistance of a High Order, they are devastating. And that particular High Order, again, likes to employ them regularly. I mentioned the High Orders a few times now, so let's jump onto them. The High Orders are technically 2 groups, Seraphim, Oraphim. But technically speaking, I'm told the Cherubim fall into this as well. The reason being, that rather than having a capacitor, they have a power source inside of them that produces grace itself. I was not told any more than this, and was strictly requested not to dig any further. But point is, these power sources allow these individuals to far surpass a human being. As such, though, their bodies need continuous maintenance. So whereas the 3 low orders each have a company dedicated for the entire order, or maybe a couple companies for an entire order, each high order angel has one company for the entire angel. That's it. The company, their primary asset, is the one angel. Because of their position of prominence, though, and the fact that these individuals are seen as saints, truly holy, they are given a celebrity-like status and live very affluently, and actually have, well, they're on the board. But because they're there, the Prophet sends a legate, a officer who is there to maintain the angels' mental faculties. As my understanding, it's simply just to check in on them. They're never a problem, of course, but it's to make sure that they're healthy and happy. Because at the end of the day, if something is upsetting an angel, you'll know about it. These are people who can not just put you through a wall, but put you through the entire building lengthways. So, best to keep on their good side. As benevolent as they are built to kill, first and foremost. To start with the Seraphim. The Seraphim are the pinnacle of Neo Eden's combat cyborg enhancements. They are far and above anything else we produce for combat. We are talking beyond speed of sound by a country mile, and in fact, even as far as barely breaching orbit. They can go into space, for a brief time at least, and survive re-entry with no issues. Should they need it, they can don extra power armor, which, woe unto any who make a Seraphim don that much armor. This armor is, of course, built with various thrusters to push them even faster. Though, typically, if a Seraphim stays in their corporate lodging, when needed for a mission, they are often deployed via a... how to put this? It's like a railgun, but it can launch a person. Essentially, often called a sling, or a rail sling. Of course, many Seraphim are loners, though. They don't typically come with a group, and they often wander the lands itself, dealing with problems before they become, well, an issue at all, and coming back only when they wish to. Some like to stay. A good example would be the Red Angel, Lady Cobrel, a angel who Cobrel Heavy Industries has put a lot of work into, both for PR and also augmentation, especially with the track record of earning the name Red Angel. There are, of course, others. Lord Zephyr is a good example. He, to my understanding, doesn't stay in the city much, preferring to stay in the skies, which he can do indefinitely. Again, his frame is further modified for aerial travel, beyond even the standard, but again, he's a high order, he can request this, and as long as the legate assigned to him is fine with it, he can do it. Now, I mentioned there were 2 different types, and as much as I could go on about the Seraphim and their weapons, and to briefly addendum that, on the weaponry front, high-frequency blades, prototype plasma weaponry, railguns, inbuilt weapons, coil guns, lasers, and also, to my understanding, a unique form of technophurgy. Though, it's hard to say exactly what it does, as I wasn't able to get much information on it, though, from what I understand, it's very dangerous. But we'll leave the battle angels alone for a second, and move to the commanders, the Oraphim. Though the Oraphim don't always take charge, sometimes a low order ascended to an archangel, which is still low order, could take charge. The Oraphim is a step above that for command. They are able to command vast hordes alone, without any command staff, surrounded by a sea of cherub. The Oraphim still bear a humanoid frame, like the Seraphim do, though they are adorned by a set of rotating rings for halo that hover above their face, and sometimes slide over it, acting as essentially all-seeing eyes, able to take in all information, digital or otherwise. Instead, they can see the very soul of people around them with that, which, considering we do have technologies that utilize the human soul, yeah, I believe it. They typically have various smart weapons and unique cherubim attuned directly to them, which have extremely advanced seeking missiles. The Orifum essentially utilize technophurgy and very smart weapons to flatten anything that's too close, and otherwise provides various buffs and supports to various units across the area. And in all honesty, they are very aloof. They do stick around the city, to my understanding, but they're also loners, preferring to stick to the digital world, to my understanding. Lastly, but not least, the humble cherubim. This is an instance where the human element was removed, and a machine was given the grace. What was potentially a controversial move had it not been the maker who did this first. The cherubim can be anything from a extremely exquisite high-end pet. Yes, there are high-end pets that are very alive, that have grace inside of them. It's only the very rich who have this, by the way. Just to be clear, you can't afford it. Don't ask. You definitely can't afford it, and neither can I, frankly. I wish I could, but if I was that wealthy, life would be very different. But they can go from that to being various combat drones that fulfill various purposes, to heavier, fully autonomous tanks in some cases. In the rare time where an entire army's worth of angels are deployed, this is their tank, by the way. To aircraft as well. We do have human usable aircraft, of course, and tanks, but again, there are cherubim equivalents that have a slightly different role. On the larger scale, there are much more heavier cherubim, which either act as either heavier units or act in a more public service role. In the extreme case, there are even cherubim who act as supercomputers. These much larger, more powerful cherubim. In fact, a good example is in our very own archive, because you might imagine the amount of data and information that has to be stored here. There is a cherubim at the heart of this archive that handles all of it. So, if that gives you a scale of how big they can be, and the archive is, well, 19 floors at least, and that isn't to account how wide it is. And just to be clear, that's 10 floors up, 9 floors down, not including the ground floor, so I suppose we're 20 floors, really. Point is, they have a lot of purposes, and are very respected, and the High Orders treat them well. Many regard them as kindred of sorts. I don't fully understand it, but who am I to question the divine, after all? Now, there is technically one other High Order, the Zephyrim. All I was told about that particular variant, however, is it's the property of the Ministry of the Veil, and not to ask any further questions. But essentially, it is a variation of the Seraphim class. So, very similar in usage. The Ministry of the Veil, just to give a little bit of an addendum on them, are our Inquisition, they are our secret police, and anything that requires a deep look into via law enforcement or to deal with heresy, Maker forbid, that's their remit. And their Inquisitors are... their word is law. All by the Prophet. Unless he and the clergy say otherwise, they have ultimate power. The only exception to my understanding is the Angels, though, again, the Legate is technically a member of the Inquisition as well, so they technically have say there too. Now, I don't want to go too long, because of course, there's much more I could say, so we'll go a couple more bits of Neo Eden. A big thing we do, as I mentioned before, is outposts. We don't wish to have an empire. We definitely could. And considering how hard we beat Dravania, I'm very confident if we wanted to take the head of the Dravanian Emperor and take the Empire for ourselves, I feel like we could have, honestly, many times over. The Republic as well, I don't think would stand a chance if we came at them in anger, but that wasn't our purpose. The purpose of Neo Eden is to combat the unholy, the demon. Everything else is lesser import and will be dealt with if needed, to my understanding. The outposts are there to monitor and ensure that various bits of the Maker's work, or ensure that the demons don't get anywhere without us knowing. Another thing we do, though, is when we find a isolated settlement, we will put a fortress there, or we will actually put in a monastery and take in various orphans into that, either as an order of nuns or monks. The latter typically are focused on either martial pursuits to train soldiers or to handle data and understand the works of the Maker. Whereas the nuns, they will typically, again, handle data and training, though they will look more at training analysts and training those who can provide specific skills to New Eden and have them shipped off to New Eden. Though, recent events have had a bit of a schism in that, because one particular chapel, which is one of the lesser, well, it was originally a bit of a lesser institute. The monasteries, the more established ones, the chapel's like kind of a satellite to them. Though this chapel lost its monastery and all connected chapels. Chapel 47 would become quite famous, and is still considered a chapel, even though it's armed more than any monastery, for being an exception to the soldiers guarding it were slain, and the nuns had to take arms, impressing both the clergy, the prophet, and also one particular company and their primary asset. They were later given various augmentations, with some of their more elite warriors, or proven warriors at least, being fully augmented into Nephilim, though a unique variant that have flight packs built into them, as well as being gifted a lighter variant of Paladin power armor, which the Paladins didn't quite like. It was too light and they weren't quite fond of the flight aspect. However, these sisters were very fond of it. As such, it was given to them for a price, though they didn't have to pay it necessarily. A very particular company, Cobral Heavy Industries, was involved in a lot of this, as well as the Archon bikes. The Archon bike is a prototype jet bike with an inbuilt laser weapon. Extremely dangerous, though, again, they were happy to take it, and have used it quite well. Another group I'll briefly mention, again, the corporate extraction teams. They are a far more privatized group who go out into the world and will acquire resources, and will then pay for military support or angel support. I will stress, by the way, the angels are paid for by the military because they're not part of the military technically. They have to throw exorbitant fees at companies to have access to their primary assets. Now, I won't keep going too long. Again, I don't want to drag this log out longer than it need be. And there is much more we can talk about. So if you are interested in hearing more sooner, we can certainly discuss that. And I have plenty more to discuss on Neo Eden, be it from the more in-depth on the early days, or perhaps I'll need to refer you to a colleague on that one, as, again, the early days are shrouded. Or perhaps you'd like to hear more on the Angels specifically, and what they're like, their orders. Perhaps you want to hear more about the military, or maybe more civilian life, and hear about what it's like being a Neo Edener. I can certainly talk a lot about my personal experience in that one. But I'll wrap things up here, dear listener, as I don't wish to keep you for too long. You have your duties to do, after all. So, this will be your archivist, Jerome, signing off for now. This was another log from the Neo Eden archives. I do hope you enjoyed, and yes, finally, we have done Neo Eden. I hope you enjoyed today's log. It's been a long time coming, honestly, and this was actually the first faction I created, so I'm quite happy to finally produce this for you. There's a lot I could say on it, and this is probably going to end up being one of the longer ones. But I tried to keep it condensed as much as I could. I mentioned a lot of stuff. So, if you think, ooh, you've been quite light on the details, I had to be. I really had to be, because this was the one I had the most work on. Honestly, it was this one, and I think Dravania. And the rest kind of flourished after that. I guess the demons were technically second, but they weren't a full faction in my head for a while. But that's the end of the overview series. So from here, we're going to have to look at other aspects of the setting, and perhaps various events, people, and specific stuff now, I think. So, if you've got any particular things you want to hear about, let me know, and we'll certainly endeavour to produce it for you. I know one person has discussed with me a little bit about the wars between the Empire and Republic, so think that might be next. But if there's a strong desire for anything else in particular, let me know. But this will be your Archivist signing off for now. I'll see you all real soon. You take care of yourselves, dear listeners.